Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at GCNlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Everyone all set? Yeah? Cocked? Locked? Here we go. Your dial set correctly to USA Prepares. We broadcast 2 hours from high atop the Missouri Ozark Mountains. Monday through Friday, 9 to 11 a.m. Brad is engineering the broadcast in Minnesota. I'm Vincent Finelli. And live with us in Australia is Guineith Isaacs. Welcome, Guineith.
Hello, Vincent. How are you this morning?
I feel so good. I'm doing great, and I'm really looking forward to today's broadcast, talking about bugging out. And who knows better about bugging out than Guineith Isaacs? You've done it for multiple reasons, but yeah, you have left the safety of home, the safety of a roof, heat, electricity, and gone out to parts yet to be discovered until you got there with your family and experienced firsthand what it's really like and the dangers, all the situations that you can encounter, lack of food, lack of water, how do you bathe, how do you stay safe, how do you protect yourself from the elements and two-legged predators and four-legged predators and bugs and snakes, and I mean all those things that we don't really think about are out there for your at your 24/7. They're out there.
Yep. That's about the sum of it.
Hey,
things have to be pretty bad at home for you to make that decision. And for us, things certainly were, because in my particular case, we had a pair of two of the most notorious pedophiles in the state living around the corner from us, and they were stalking my son. And at the time, my boys were, let me think. They would have been around about 5 and 7 years old when we moved into that house. When we decided to get out of there, they would have been about 9 and about 11 years old. It could be a year or two different, year or two either way, depending on where the birthdays fell. I think they both had their birthdays by then. But it has to be pretty bad at home for you to make that decision. But there's any number of reasons why you would want to do that if you were facing a natural disaster, like, for instance, Hurricane Harvey, Hurricane Irma. If you had a situation where there was domestic violence and you were a woman, and if you had creepy predators living around the corner, as it was in my case, it's something that takes a bit of planning, okay? But in the case of a natural disaster, you may not have that much time to plan. So hence the need to have the box that we described yesterday. If you're in an area that's prone to a certain type of natural disaster, to have that box made up. When I was in New Zealand, they said all the time, but, that's because I lived in Rotorua. in the middle of a caldera, okay, a Yellowstone-type caldera, and they advised us to have a box made up at all times because if the volcano decided to go hot, then we probably wouldn't have much time to get out, you know. Just imagine if you were living, I don't know, probably about 10 kilometres from the Old Faithful geyser, at the heart of the Yellowstone Park. That's about how far we lived from the Pohutu geyser in Rotorua. And that's their answer to Old Faithful. Basically, it's in our humble opinion, it's just as impressive. And people, Hollywood stars, royalty, Eleanor Roosevelt travelled to New Zealand back in the day to see the Pohutu geyser. How's that? And just around the corner from where we were living, there was a set of streets, and one of them was called Theodore Crescent, the other one was called Eleanor Crescent, and guess what road linked them? Roosevelt Road. That was just around the corner, and they named that particular subdivision after the president and his wife. So there you go. But this is it. If you're living in such a place, you need to have, or if you're in such a circumstance, you need to have a bug-out plan ready to go at a moment's notice. And in our case, we got a van together. It was a Nissan E20 in our case, camper van. I would recommend, if you can, to get a camper van, if you know that you might have to do this sort of thing, because it's about the most comfortable way to live, and it gives you the most flexibility. And being a one-ton van, you can park in a regular parking spot. You don't have to find a special sort of parking spot to live. But that, of course, depends on your circumstances, and especially with children. And we had a dog as well. In fact, we had a couple of dogs. One of them had to be rehomed before we left. But the other one, she was good enough for us to be able to take with us. And we thought that was probably a good idea because she was a Rottweiler cross. And so she had multiple functions, and she was trained as a hunting dog as well. And so along the journey, she served multiple functions. She was a security patrol, and she absolutely was devoted to my sons and I. And she was beautiful, and she also basically fed herself. Although she was cunning, she would usually kill the animals that she'd captured. We wouldn't let her out in rural areas, obviously. We would let her out in, more outback type areas, and she would go and she would hunt. But, unfortunately, she didn't actually bring that much home. But we had the van quite well stocked with stock powders, noodles, things like pasta, potatoes, carrots, and onions. And I also had a pretty good knowledge of what herbs were edible. So, and that and the occasional bought meal, we managed to make it. We went, we were probably camping out for about 3 months across the Australian outback. And that was that we would, camp out somewhere, and then the government check day would come around, and then we would, I would go and buy fuel, and I would go and buy some supplies, and then we would move, and then we would camp for another week in our new location. And that's basically how we managed it. And doing it that way, it took us around about 3 months to get across the continent of Australia. So there we go.
As you say that,
yeah.
how important is it being on the move when you're bugging out?
It's fairly. It depends on your circumstances. With us, I had a fairly good idea that there would be people who would want to know, hostile people, who would want to know where we were, and in fact there were. So for us, it was important to keep a low profile, to keep to fairly isolated areas, and to basically live off the grid as much as we could. So, of course, you have to stop for fuel. Of course, you have to stop for water. But I can't underestimate here how important it is to know how to pray to God. Okay, because there were certain situations where things could have gone very, very badly for us indeed. And because I prayed, and like I said yesterday, one of the most important items of your kit is your Bible. And even better is to do the old Sunday school thing and do memory verses. But don't wait until you need to get out of there to start reading your Bible, because it was sometimes the Bible stories that I knew, and I would ask God for help, and he would bring a particular Bible story to my remembrance. And there's a great number of them about people having to survive stretches in the wilderness, both with and without people hot on the tail. And it's remarkable, because when I followed the advice that was in that particular scripture, we were generally okay. And it was still precarious. It is going to be precarious for you, even in a natural disaster situation, where you're not going to be the only one bugging out, because, obviously in a situation of natural disaster, there's going to be lots and lots of other people who are in the same circumstance. Some of those people are going to be good people, and some of them are going to be bad people. And you have to have the common sense to discern very, very quickly who is who. To stay away from the bad ones and possibly make allegiances with the good ones.
Right.
If you
we'll be right back. Class, I've got a short announcement. Tonight at the Holiday Inn in Springfield, Missouri, on Glenstone Avenue, North Glenstone, Holiday Inn. Dr. Joel Wallach will be there, 7 o'clock tonight. So Dr. Joel Wallach, 7 o'clock tonight. It's free. If you'd like to meet USA Prepares instructor Dr. Joel Wallach in Springfield, Missouri, the Holiday Inn on Glenstone, North Glenstone, tonight. Starts at 7 o'clock. 7 o'clock tonight, Dr. Joel Wallach, Holiday Inn, North Glenstone, Springfield, Missouri. And, you heard the commercial for Dr. Bill Deagle's Nutriodine. I take it. And just before the segment started, I came back into the studio after taking my Nutriodine. And that's one of the protocols that I'm on to get better. Seriously, I'm not exaggerating. I'm not embellishing. I'm just telling you the way it is. And I'm going to give you a full report as to how the supplements that I've been taking, in my opinion, have affected my health. As soon as I have more information, I will share that with you. So one of the things that I'm doing is Nutriodine, NutriMedicals by Dr. Bill Deagle. Guineith Isaacs is with us. Guineith, I just want to share something with you. You were talking about religion, and one of the things that has been bothering me is these mega churches, and specifically Joel Osteen and his mega church and his multi-millions that he has been accumulating from his church members, and his reluctance to let the riffraff come into his nice carpeting in his mega church with the superstorm, Hurricane Harvey. And it bothered me. It bothered me because his church is built on the backs of the little people, And I used the term riffraff, and I meant that not in a negative way. What I meant was, I guess it would be maybe his opinion, I'm surmising, that these people who are soaking wet and might have mud on their feet, who wants them to come into his church? But those are the people who built the church, the little people. And so I happened to be chatting with a guy yesterday. I made a new friend for about 10 seconds until I said something about these pastors and these multimillionaire pastors of churches and praise the Lord and how they've accumulated millions of dollars. And the guy that I was talking to was furious with me because they deserve the right to make as much money as they can. I guess I'm confused because I thought that one of the pillars of religion was to help the little people, help the poor, and not accumulate wealth based on the backs of the little people. Now, I know the Catholic Church and other churches have done it, and they've kind of concealed it pretty well. However, the priests, they're supposed to take a vow of poverty, and the nuns, a vow of poverty. But the pastors of these large churches have made millions and millions and millions of dollars. And it's upsetting to me. But this new friend who, I guess, unfriended me after about 10 seconds of me talking about two things. One was these churches.
Yep. Well, I'll tell you what. My husband, before I met him, he actually was a minister of religion in the Pentecostal church. He was an ordained minister of the Christian Revival Crusade. And do you know something? He had a mission to the poor. And his missionary building, I don't think it had carpet. It had about 32 rooms, and it was over 4 stories in the middle of Fitzroy. And it was next to the Hells Angels headquarters. Perfect location for such a ministry. You know something? It didn't matter how much mud people had on their feet. And instead of relying on donations for his ministry, he was a painter and decorator, and he would work 2 and sometimes 3 jobs to keep the mission going. And he funded it out of his own pocket. If you're going to do a work for God, by all means, go for it. But try and find, some other way to fund it other than from the backs of the people who can probably afford it least.
Guineith Isaacs is with us, and we've been talking about bugging out, and I mentioned Joel Osteen and mega millionaires and mega churches and my displeasure with them. Jay in Iowa, you have a comment?
Yeah, I originally had the same sentiment you do, and while I do not agree with Joel Osteen's teachings, with his, sin as you will, because it's all forgiven, and all this, his congregation, as the storm was hitting and whatnot, they were inside preparing, and they were doing inflating life rafts, inflatable rafts, to go out to the people to bring them in, and after they were set, after everything was done inside of the church, then they opened up the church to the people to bring them in. But they were preparing to bring people in. I mean, Houston is a very big city, and I haven't been able to get down there yet. I have a load going down to Temple, so I'll be able to tell you what I see there. But
yeah, what about the fact that that the news said there was some flooding in the church, and that really wasn't exactly true because it was pictures of previous flooding, not current flooding, and so forth. And so, what about that? I mean, that's what I read. That they weren't able to accept, the victims because of flooding. Well, they weren't flooded, according to the pictures that I saw.
Well, I have, my wife has some Facebook friends that live in Houston, and they said that they were preparing, they were filling up the life rafts and, airing those things up and getting food prepared and everything, so that when the church was ready, that they could bring the people in. I mean, and eventually they did.
Yeah, eventually.
It wasn't on everybody's, we want it open now, I would like to, I would, right now it's 9:30, and I would really like for Bass Pro Shops to be open right now, but they're not open right now, so,
So I had a neighbor, and I called him up when I was running for the board of directors of an electric cooperative, and I said, hey, I just want to let you know that I'm taking a page out of your book. You ran for county commissioner, and I'm going to run for the board of directors. Would you consider signing the petition? He goes, well, caught me off guard. So I caught him off guard by asking him if he would support his neighbor. I mean, his next door neighbor, not the guy, not a neighbor, 5 miles away. I'm talking about our fence and his fence is the same fence. Okay, and he wasn't prepared. Now, what does it take to be prepared for when people are knocking at your door saying, "Hey, listen, it's really bad, and I haven't eaten. I'm freezing cold. I'm soaking wet. Can you help me?" Well, I'm getting ready. I'll let you know. Come on, Jay. I'm not buying it. I'd like to buy it.
Right.
I'd like to say, boy, he was really trying to help people, but I'm not buying it. I've read stories about him and his wife and how they are not all that polite when they fly commercial flights. They're pretty demanding.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. I'm sure you've read them too. So I have a tough time with people who are, praise the Lord. Let's thank the Lord. And that's what they say. But they do not exactly the same thing. Okay. Me, I haven't set foot in a Catholic church in 15 or 20 years. Yeah. But that doesn't mean that I'm not spiritual. That doesn't mean that I don't believe in God. That doesn't mean that I don't go to my church on my John Deere tractor or my International tractor or my Ford tractor as I'm going around in circles. Just me and my God. Talking about things, giving thanks. That's kind of my church. And by the way, Mrs. Finelli her church is in the same place. When she's on the International tractor, raking hay, she's talking to the Lord, giving thanks. Okay, so we don't have to, by the way, and I just don't throw $20 bills out of my back pocket as I'm going around raking hay or baling hay or cutting hay. Okay, which you are required to do in a formal church, right? It's a pretty strong suggestion, and they have facial recognition cameras in these churches, just to make sure you're okay and you're not sick, and you're there tithing, as directed. I mean, really?
Well, in the subject of tithing, and I have personally experienced this. In the book of Malachi, God says, on this one subject, you can test me. On anything else, God says, don't test me. But on this one subject, and I did this, I didn't care where the money went, because I knew I was doing it for God, and in time, over a period of time, God rewarded me and built me up, because I was at a very, very low place. And God said, go ahead, test me on this and see if I don't give it back to you, hundredfold. And so far this year, I've made $48,000, and I've never, ever made that before in my life. So tithing does, and it is between you and God.
Yeah, between you and God, not between you and Joel Osteen, right?
Right.
It's just, well, I got to ask you, though, if God is all-knowing, all-powerful, why does he need money?
He doesn't. However, his servants, and those that are trustworthy and loyal to God and doing his actual service, put that money to use.
Yeah. Well, and you said, I believe something like you don't really care where it goes. I do, and I don't donate to any organized charity. However, because I've learned about them over the years, how they squander money, but I do help people directly. Okay, if someone needs something and I can provide it, whether it be Federal Reserve notes or whether it be food or help with supplements, I will do that.
Yep.
However, I do care where it goes because I used to help this guy who was, we'll call him down on his luck. Yeah, he was down on his luck, and I would pay for his meals at a restaurant until one day I saw, I'd go to the waitress and I'd say, I'd like to pay for that, the man with the red shirt. I'd like to pay for his dinner, and I don't want him to know. And I would say that, and it would be week after week after week. And then one day, I saw he got there early and he had 2 mixed drinks. That was it. That was the end.
Yeah.
That was the end. Okay? I'm not doing that. So I do care where it goes. Jay, I've got to run. Guineith, did you have any comments?
Well, it's like this. I try to give when I can. But something? In the Bible, it talks about when you give, that you should give to widows and you should give to orphans, and that the tithe paid to the widows and to the orphans is just as valid as the tithe that's paid directly to the priest. Well, I am a widow, and my sons are orphans, and nevertheless, we are actually exempted from the tithe, being the recipients of the tithe, instead of the, having to pay it. But nevertheless, I give a certain amount of my money, and I give an amount of my time. If you added it up over the year, it would probably be several weeks or maybe up to a month or two each year in my labor on working on topics that God specifically wants me to work on, namely upholding the British common law, which is based on the King James Version of the Holy Bible, and is God's law for the English-speaking people. And if there's not people who are there to uphold and to, stand by the British common law, then and to educate people about it, it's going to fall by the wayside. And the results for all of us will be slavery. And that also goes into, as well, American common law. So educating people about the amendments, which also goes into my USA Prepares work as well, the importance, the British common law way has a different way of putting it. Okay, it's not so explicitly said, but you have the right to bear arms. You have the right to habeas corpus, which is the Fourth Amendment. You have the right to freedom of speech and freedom of religion, which is the First Amendment. And you have the right to privacy, which is once again the Fourth Amendment. All the amendments are all in there, in the original British common law. But
Hold that thought. Guineith, right now, at this moment, more than 13 million Floridians, 62% of the state, remain without power.
Wow.
Yeah, it's pretty serious. And, when you think about that, that's no heat, no air conditioning. If you have well water, you probably don't have water to, even if the water did run downhill in your area, how do you pump water without electricity? So I'm sure some people have generators, and I hope they kept them high enough so that they didn't get waterlogged. But another thing is, these underground storage tanks for gasoline and diesel. Just a small little hole in the cap. Water will run down there and
contaminate the water supply.
Yeah,
Not
and also
septic tanks and sewage treatment facilities are going to be flooded out.
Right, and cross-connected. Yeah, so what we have is, when you pull into these filling stations, these gas stations, if you will, they have these caps that you drive over, and that's where they fill up the underground tanks. Well, if there's a slight leak in the cap, water will, if you've got flooding, water can go into the fuel tanks underground, and your vehicle will not run on water. Yeah, and so that's a problem. Now, yeah, there are fuel filters on the dispensing pumps, yes, but if there's a failure there, you can get water in your fuel tank. A number of people have experienced that over the years. A couple drops of water in diesel fuel will shut down the engine. A couple ounces of water will easily shut down a gasoline engine, if there's water in the tank. So that's something to think about. So, Florida is it's going to be a tough row to hoe to clean it up. There are utility workers. There's a network of more than 50,000 of them on their way to Florida, and some of them may already be there. But what a mess. What a mess. What a coordination effort it is, when you think about it, to get all these wires back up in the air, replace power poles. Where are all those power poles that got knocked over? Where are they going to come from? I guess they're going to have to come from out of state, because Florida probably doesn't have enough of them, in their inventory to replace all of them. All the wire. I know they don't have all the wire. So a lot of parts are needed, and they're going to have to come from elsewhere around the country. So it's going to be a big effort, and of course Texas as well. Devastation was pretty widespread. So, yes.
And how many electrical transformers do you suppose have been shorted out and destroyed?
Well, I'm sure.
I haven't heard
anyone
talking about that. I haven't heard anyone talking about nuclear power plants in Florida. I don't know if there are any.
Well, yes, there are. Yes, there are. And they were in the path of the storm. So it was quite serious. We could have had a Fukushima, where the grid went down and the cooling pumps weren't able to cool the nuclear reactors. It could have happened. Fortunately, I have not read any reports about that, which is great news.
Yeah. They can put them into a shutdown mode, which is much safer for the plant. And I think that they actually did this in the case of Irma, but apparently not in the case of Harvey.
Well, I read a report, and I don't know if they did, but I read a report that they were going to shut down the nuclear reactors, or some of them in Florida. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So the bottom line is...
I certainly hope they did.
Yeah, the bottom line is most of us are downwind from nuclear reactors. That's kind of dangerous. And I wish we had never built these darn things. However, we have. And what would... if you want to talk to someone who is a real advocate of their industry, just go talk to someone in the power industry, the electric power industry. They will defend their industry almost to the death, and it's an industry that is polluting the planet, electromagnetic radiation, as well as air pollution, as well as ground
nuclear
pollution, as well as ground and nuclear. They've done a lot of damage to the planet. However, most people would say, that's okay, because I need electricity. Guineith, we'll be right back after the top of the hour news and commercial announcements. We're talking about bugging out, and we'll talk about what you really need to think about. And how it really is dangerous bugging out, because you're leaving everything that you know about. Everyone all set? Cocked? Locked? Hour number 2 of USA Prepares. Guineith Isaacs is with us, and we're talking about bugging out. So if you look it up, bugging out, it's fleeing in a panic. Okay? It's leaving quickly, rapidly. And think about this. Class, think about, when you've got 5 people in the house and you want to go shopping. You go, okay, tell you what, who wants to go shopping? All right, good, let's go. How long does it take you to get in the vehicle to leave once you decide, okay, we're all going shopping, let's go? How long does it take? Let's say that shopping adventure.
At least an hour.
And that's not an exaggeration, is it? No, it really isn't. And the point is, everybody has to use the restroom, okay? And then as soon as the last person uses the restroom, the first person wants to use it again, okay? So we start that all over again. Right. And some are in the car, and then they get in the car and they're waiting, and then they get out of the car because they go, hey, where's everybody? And they come back in the house, and then you go back to the car, and it takes forever, okay? And that's going shopping. And that, most people aren't thinking about, let's bring some water and let's bring some food and blankets and a can opener and some matches and let's bring a couple pillows. Let's bring all that. They're not thinking about that. All they're trying to do is get in the car and go. And it still takes an hour. So think about that, and think about if you were to bug out, what it would take. And I mentioned on the air that I talked with John Statmiller, and my number is 1 in 1,000 is really paying attention and doing anything about preparedness. That really is my number, 1 in 1,000. So, how many people have actually had a little fire drill at their home? Well, okay, so what I'm saying is turn the power off over the weekend and see what it's like for 3 hours. Friday night, starting at 6 o'clock. Just turn the circuit breakers off. For those, don't shut off the power to the refrigerator or freezer, medical devices. Don't do that. But shut the power off and then see what it's like living without electricity. And see what it's like living in the dark. And then you'll wonder where the flashlight is and go, geez, I can't believe it. Where is the flashlight? And how come the batteries are dead? And where are the other batteries? And how come they're dead? And where are the matches? Where are the candles? I mean, that kind of stuff happens. Then you go to open a can of beans, because that's going to be dinner, cold beans, because your electric stove doesn't work, right? Because you shut the breakers off to see what it's like without power. And then you find out that your electric can opener doesn't work. And you can't find the other can opener. The manual one that you used to use. Yep. I'm looking at a lot of red bars here.
Well,
red bars mean I'm having trouble communicating. Yeah.
Hello, can you hear me?
Well, here's the point. Yeah, I can. Here's the point, Guineith. So, I've challenged people at seminars I've given to do exactly what I talked about. Friday night, the power is going to go off at 6 o'clock. Why? Because you're going to shut it off. And just 3 hours with the family without electricity. And people say, yeah, great idea. Yeah, I'm in. I'll do it. Yep. Yep. And nobody does it. So they don't know what it's really going to be like. But they could turn it back on anytime they want, okay? But they won't do it because it's too inconvenient. They're going to miss the ball game. They're going to miss the game shows. I don't know what they're going to miss. But they feel like they're going to miss so much, and they don't want to be inconvenienced, so they don't know what it's going to be like in an emergency. But they could. They could if they wanted to, but they don't want to. So how do you help people like that? The answer is you can't. You can't. I give up. I can talk about it, but, people show up at my house and say, hey, listen, you were right. I should have paid attention. I'm going to say, yeah, you should have paid attention, and I can't help you because I don't have enough blankets for your family and your extended family and all your relatives, and I don't have enough food for all you guys, but you could have had enough if you paid attention. And what's the worst case, Guineith? The worst case is if you buy an extra case of beans, okay? An extra case of cans of beans, 12. The worst case is you're going to have to eat it.
Yep.
That's the worst case. So buy things that you like, that you will eat, that will store for a long time, that have some, some nutrition. You're not going to get a lot out of cans, but some nutrition. It'll keep you alive. Why not? What's so hard about that? And what's with this panic about water?
I'll tell you what, after substantial research into the topic, the best value, because if you're going to bug out, the other thing you've got to realize is everything you pack in the car is going to have weight, okay? And if you, especially if you're planning to cross an arid area, okay, you have to be aware that the more weight your car is carrying, the more fuel it's going to use. So cans of beans might be a good option if you are not expecting to be home for 2 weeks, let's say. But if you are planning on an extended bug out, the best option by far for a bug out food is brown rice, okay? Because I think that, when my husband was alive, he said, well, we had to do another bug out earlier on in my life. And he said, well, he had 5 children. Actually, he had 7 children. 6 small children and 1 adult child. And he had me and he had himself, okay? And what happened was we had to bug out interstate on a journey. That one was about 1,500 kilometres. To get to the most recent bug out was about 3,000 kilometres. But even the first bug out was not across desert country. It was up the east coast of Australia. The thing you've got to realise is water weighs a lot. Okay, if you're going into an arid region, you have to budget water for each person, and I would say a minimum of 3 litres per person per day. Okay. That's an absolute survival minimum limit for going into an arid region. But if you're carrying cans of beans, they will have water in the beans, and it adds to the weight. If you are cooking brown rice, it's reasonably nourishing, okay? It provides calories and carbohydrates, okay? And you'll find that you'll be able to feed the family for at least several weeks from just 1 10-kilogram bag of brown rice. And that's a really handy tip. That and some stock powders to make it palatable, oil or butter, and like I say, for vegetables, things that will keep, onions, carrots, and potatoes. Especially. They're your best vegetable options, and I would probably add sweet potatoes to that list as well. You can do it, but it's best to take dried foods rather than canned foods if you're going to bug out for longer than 2 or 3 weeks at a stretch. Okay? That's just a handy tip. And don't be, learn how to recognize edible roadkill and learn to get over your fussiness about it, if that makes sense. If you come across an animal who's been killed in the traffic and its eyes are still in good condition, okay, and it's early in the day, it means it was killed the night before and it's probably going to be edible. And that is a lot of meat. In the U.S., it will probably be a deer, okay? But even if it's something like a fox or a cougar or something like that, the leg joints especially, they are going to be edible, okay? Probably the only wild creatures in America that would not be edible would be things like wolverines and skunks. But most other wild creatures you'll find are edible. And I'm sure that anyone who lives in the Appalachians would be able to testify to that because that's apparently a large part of their meat diet up in that part of the continent, and they are apparently regularly in the habit of chucking roadkill deer onto the back of their truck. And you don't find much roadkill lying around in that part of the country, and it'll help to feed your dog as well, and your dog is a vital member of your team, as I've mentioned over and over and over and over again. But the dog needs to be fed as well, and you've got to remember it. And it'll pay you back in the loyalty, okay? But the thing is, don't expect to be clean and tidy, but do expect to be in order, okay? So you may not be bathing quite as regularly, but you should still maintain regular habits, okay, if that makes sense. So you get up in the morning, you go for your ablutions, you know, go and find a tree and bury your waste, bury it, because there's nothing more unpleasant when you're driving along in the countryside and you go to relieve yourself and you find that somebody else has been there before you and they haven't buried their waste, okay? It's just disgusting. Take a stick with you or a shovel or something and just, you know, dig a hole. And, you know, you've got to maintain this sort of hygiene. It's not just for you, it's for everybody else as well, because there are other people who use the road, and you have to be considerate of the other road users, okay, and the people around you.
Yep, hold that thought.
I think we've got music coming.
Yeah, we do. We'll be right back with Guineith Isaac. You know, Guineith, you were talking about water. And, you know, you can get dehydrated food, and you can save some weight. But, yeah, you've got a problem with water and taking water with you and making sure you have enough. 3 minutes without air, 3 days without water, 3 weeks without food. We all know about that. Okay. So how much does water weigh? Well, it weighs about 8 1/3 pounds per gallon. And what does that mean? So, class, I'm not advocating you use those red gasoline jugs to put water in. But I'm just trying to give you an idea of how much water weighs. They have blue water jugs that are very similar to the gasoline 5-gallon gas jugs, okay? But they're blue, and they're designed for potable water. Well, if you were to fill one of those with 5 gallons of water, it would weigh about 41, almost 42 pounds, 41.7 pounds. That's without the container. So you're looking at about 50 pounds for 5 gallons of water. 50 pounds for 5 gallons of water. That should explain how heavy water is. We have a trailer here on our farm. It holds about 300 gallons of water. It's stainless steel. It's a military surplus. A water buffalo. And we use that during drought situations. So if we need to bring water to the cows, we can bring this trailer. And it's only 300 gallons of water. Maybe 400. The point is, this thing uses 2 3/4-ton truck tires because it's so heavy with just 300 gallons of water. You know, with the trailer, we're talking about roughly 3,000 pounds.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, over 3,000 pounds with the trailer. We're talking about almost 4,000 pounds of trailer, tank, and 300 gallons of water. That's an enormous amount of weight. That means that the little trailer to hold this 300 gallons weighs more than most cars. It's only 300 gallons. A bathtub holds about 40 gallons.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to share with our class how you're absolutely right. Water is really, really heavy.
Yeah. And that was one of our biggest problems because we had to ration the water really, really closely, okay, in order to, you know, just survive. And, you know, that was definitely a problem. And we found that there were all of the survival advice that you get in, like, the SAS Survival Handbook, about being able to dig into a creek bed and get water from the bottom of the creek bed doesn't apply in arid regions, okay? It just doesn't. And if you do hit water, it's likely to be too salty to drink in an arid region, okay? And most of this advice does relate to being in an arid zone, because most of our time was spent in outback Australia, which is dry, 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 and then more dry, okay? If you see a farmer's water tank, you can expect that that water tank is being monitored by a farmer with some form of firearm, probably a shotgun, and that most of the water tanks in outback Australia, and I'm saying probably by extension in arid parts of the United States, are probably locked. And for the reason that farmers just get fed up with people, they probably wouldn't mind so much the occasional person coming and filling their tanks, but when people leave the taps running, that's a big offensive no-no, okay? And when we were traveling, there was a particular place that we stopped at. By the way, if there's tanks marked on the map, okay, water facilities or wells marked on the map, you cannot expect to get there and find that the tank will be full, or that the pump on the well will be working, or even that the well will still be functioning. Even if the map purports to have been printed just a few years previously, it ain't necessarily going to be so, okay? Yeah. At one point we were on our journey and there was a German tourist who was washing his plates.
Hold that thought. We've got a couple seconds for the break. We'll be right back. Class tonight, the Holiday Inn. Holiday Inn tonight, September 12th. Dr. Joel Wallach will be there in Springfield, Missouri, on Glenstone, North Glenstone. Holiday Inn tonight, North Glenstone Avenue, Springfield, Missouri. That's tonight at 7 o'clock. And let's see. Yeah, September 12th. Okay. Guineith, you were talking about a tourist who was washing his plate at one of those water tanks. What happened?
That's right. Now, this water tank was almost empty, okay? The water was just dribbling out the bottom of it. And he used the last few dribbles that came out of the tap on this water tank, out of the faucet on this water tank, to wash his plates. And I stood there and I looked at him and waited until he finished, and I said, "Excuse me?" And he said, "Yes." I said, "Are you aware that you are currently in the middle of one of the driest deserts on Earth?" Okay? That tank is almost empty. This was on the Nullarbor, okay, and which is a great desert, runs right across the southern half of Australia, all around the Great Australian Bight, okay? They have one of it. It is quite literally up there with the Death Valley of being one of the driest deserts on Earth. And this German tourist was washing his plates using the last dribbles of water from an almost empty water tank. And I said, "See that there? You have got to be aware that that is probably the difference between life and death for somebody out there, okay?" And he said, "Oh, I'm very sorry. I was just washing my plates." And I said to him, "Listen, you can eat off a dirty plate. Your plates do not have to be clean. You can scrub a plate clean enough to eat off with the sand that's around you. It's sterile because it's so hot there. That sand gets baked and it's sterile. You can scrub a plate with it." And he says, "Oh, I'm very, very sorry." And I said, I could have been really, really rude to this guy. I don't think I was from memory, but remember I felt very, very angry because here I was in the queue waiting to fill our water bottles, which for us was a matter of life and death. And he was washing his plates in our drinking water. And he got into his vehicle. He had his partner with him, and I think that they continued on their journey fairly quickly. But what happened was we went to go and fill up our water bottles, and they'd used up all the water. There was no more water coming out of the tap after that.
You're talking about carelessness? You're talking about carelessness? You're talking about carelessness and ignorance. Carelessness and ignorance.
Carelessness and ignorance and lack of thought. Now, I said, far out. I probably used a bit more, direct language than that. I can't use it on air. But what I said, listen, boys, we need a cup and we need a piece of string. And the boys went and they got a cup and they got a piece of string out of the vehicle. I tied the string to the cup handle, okay, and I climbed up to the top of the water tank to where the access manhole was. There was no manhole on the top of the tank, okay. What I mean is that there wasn't a cover on the manhole. The manhole was there, but there was no cover on it. I got the string, got the cup, and I let this cup down into the water, because even if the faucet on the tank stops working, there will usually be around about 10 centimetres, 3 or 4 inches of water in the bottom of the tank, okay? And I kept letting the cup down and pulling it back up, full of about half a cup of water each time, and then passing the cup down to the boys, and they had the water bottles on the ground, okay? And that's how we filled up our water bottles, which were, I think about 4 20-litre, of the type of Frantel, Clear Springs, Fiji water, 20-litre water bottles. Okay? I'm sure you know the ones I mean. So we didn't have the blue commercial type. We had, empty Fiji water bottles. There's about 5 gallons, if that makes sense. And I think there was some 2.5-gallon ones there as well. But that was how we filled up our, our water bottles. And that tip on its own could save your life. Keep a cup, a ceramic cup is best because it will actually sink, and a piece of string. And then, and preferably quite a long piece of string. You may be able to fit it down a well casing. You'll certainly be able to fit it down the manhole of of a water tank if you are in the same situation that we were in. But the thing is, it's about keeping your eyes open, your ears open, being as respectful as you can, but you must stand up for yourself and you must stand up for your own family, okay? Because your own clan is what matters the most, and you've got to keep your clan, your family, your team working together as a unit. And that means you've got to be gracious with one another. You have to be gracious with your team, but you also have to make sure that everybody pulls their weight. I emailed you a photo earlier. I know that you don't watch very many movies, but there's a movie out there called Pirates of the Caribbean. The latest installment is called At World's End, and the main character, Jack Sparrow, finds himself on a ship in the middle of a desert. Don't ask how he got his ship into the middle of a desert. But it was him and about 40 other Jack Sparrows being the crew of the ship. And anyone who's seen that movie will get the joke immediately. If you don't get your team working together and doing their jobs, then you're going to be like Jack Sparrow. You're going to think, I need 40 of me here just to keep this place running. It's much better to allocate jobs to particular people according to their abilities and to say, listen, we all have to work together here as a team in order to get through, and to make sure that everybody pulls their weight, but also to be gracious with people, without being a doormat either. And in that way, and it's an art. You know that, Vincent. I know that that's an area that you're particularly skilled in. But this is what true leadership is. It's not about hitting people over the head. It's not about being a thug or being a bully. It's about really getting a group of people to work together as a whole for the benefit of all. And if you can do that, then that's something pretty special. But anyway, that was what I found that I had to do as we were going across Australia. And I found that particular members of the team were especially good at particular things. For one thing, my oldest son, Connor, he has a really, really good, sharp marksmanship eye. I discovered that he had a talent for knife throwing, which came in quite handy when we stopped at particular beach locations. He was actually able to throw a skinning knife or a fish gutting knife at a crab under the water and hit it, accounting for the refraction index and all the rest of it. And we ate more than one crab because of his knife-throwing skill. I couldn't throw a knife with such accuracy. And I don't know where he learnt to do that, but I'm very glad that he did, because, like I say, it contributed to feeding us, certainly. Somebody else was good at something else, okay? And we all operated by the end of the time as a team, and that's what you really, really have to do. And you being the grown-up, you being the leader of the team, it's your job to figure out what each person is best at and to allocate the tasks according to everybody's several abilities. Yeah, and
I agree with everything you said. I mean, I keep thinking about this tourist who wasted the last little bit of water, and I'm afraid that in my current state of mind, where I am today, I would say to the guy, "Yo, shut that off now."
Yeah.
And then once he shut it off, then we'd talk about it. Like, tell you what, I'm dying of thirst here, and so is my family. I'm going to need some water. And I know you want to wash those plates. So I'll tell you what, I'm going to tank up with something to drink so I don't die here. And then if there's any left, go ahead and wash your plates. But you've got to be miserly with that water. You've got to be frugal with that water, because after us, there are going to be some other people dying of thirst. I'm afraid I would take that
You
tack.
would probably not be as patient as what I was.
No, I don't think so. Not my not my current frame of mind. No, I've seen too many stupid people in one place, and I've seen a lot of places.
Stupidity.
And I'm frustrated. I'm frustrated with the ignorance, the arrogance, the stupidity, the carelessness of too many people. We'll be right back. Guineith Isaac's with us, and if you'd like to contact her, her information's on the website, usaprepares.com, usaprepares.com, on the instructors tab. Guineith, I'm having a lot of difficulty with digital communications right now. So if I drop off, please continue, and then I'm going to call in with a telephone, the good old landline. So, Guineith, we were talking about water, and we're talking about how important it is and not wasting it. and maybe even a little bit of an aggressive attitude when you're in a life or death situation and there's carelessness with those in front of you wasting water. So I'm afraid I would take that position where I'd be pretty aggressive, probably offensive, and let the person know that we're not going to waste water because life hangs in the balance. And just because he got there first doesn't mean that his carelessness, I'm going to allow his carelessness to put my life or my family's life or the people behind me in danger. And I see it all the time. I see people on the roads. The speed limit on Interstate 44 is 70 miles an hour. That's plenty. That's plenty. But I see people with trailers and people with pickup trucks and mostly people who have, they're in the construction business. They've got trucks with ladders hanging out, and they're flying down the road. They've got to be doing 80, 85 miles an hour in a 70-mile-an-hour zone. It's carelessness, and I hate it. I hate people who are careless and reckless and unconcerned with anyone around them. I really do.
There is a very, very good reason to be polite, okay? Because you never really know the nature of the person next to you, okay? And when you're in such a situation, it's probably best to not make problems for yourself, especially if you are a woman traveling on her own with small children, even if you've got a nice big dog with you. Now, that was the person in front of us in the queue. The person behind us in the queue pulled up probably just as we were leaving, and it was probably a really, really good thing, because the fellow who pulled up behind us as we were leaving was a guy, I knew him, but it didn't quite click until we were actually on the road again. And my older son actually pointed it out to me. He said, "Mum, do you know who that was who pulled up just as we were leaving?" And we'd spoken to him momentarily, and I said, "Oh my God, it was actually him." And do you know who? It was actually a particular Melbourne gangster who once tried to assassinate my husband. That's a really, really good reason to have ears wide open to the Holy Spirit and to move when He tells you to move. When you get that feeling, when I say when the Holy Spirit tells you to move, that gut instinct that says, okay, it's time to go now. As it happened, at that time, he was heading west and we were heading east. Okay? That was a very, very good thing. Because at one time in the past, that particular man did try to assassinate my husband, because my husband was making a great deal of inroads into getting people off drugs in the poorer suburbs of Melbourne. And this particular man's stock in trade was drug dealing and drug trafficking. And I won't mention his name on air, but suffice to say that he's an extremely well-known Melbourne gangster, and he was very, very well known to my husband, and he was not friends with my husband at all. And that's a very good reason to not make a scene and to be polite, because you never know who that person is who's sitting next to you as you're travelling. I think this is the end of the broadcast, isn't it?
It is.
Oh, have we got another
Gwyneth,
segment?
thank you for staying up late.
That's quite all
No, this
right.
is it. Thank you for staying up late tonight in Australia. 7-hour time difference. I love broadcasting with you. You're a wealth of information, and you're gutsy. You're gutsy and courageous, and I don't think you take direction very well.